speak to Scott Lucas, a professor of international politics at the University of Dublin. Hello to you, and thank you for speaking to France 24. This week, we saw Egyptian and American mediators signal that there were signs of compromise. What odds would you give the parties to reach a deal?
Well, and I need to explain why, given all the chatter that we are supposedly nearing a possible ceasefire. We have been here before. Remember, as we're in the 8th month of these mass killings from Israel to Gaza, there has been repeated talk about discussions in Egypt, in Qatar, and that the sides might reach a deal, and then everything falls back. And on this occasion, I must be very honest with your viewers. Hamas will not agree to a deal unless at the end of the 3 phases, there is a ceasefire and a withdrawal of Israeli troops. Israel, and I must repeat, Benjamin Netanyahu's office is not offering a ceasefire. All they're offering is a bit of a pause so that some hostages, reports say 33 hostages, can be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. The statement that came out 2 hours ago from an Israeli official, probably from Netanyahu's office, and I need to read this, which makes the position clear. Israel will under no circumstances agree to the end of the war as part of an agreement to release our hostages. The Israeli Defense Forces will enter Rafah and destroy the remaining Hamas battalions there with or without a temporary respite. In other words, even if this deal was reached for a pause, what Netanyahu's office is saying is we will go ahead with that operation to assault Rafah, which is where, of course, as you've noted, more than 1 million Gazans are trying to find some shelter from the attacks.
Yeah, but we heard from the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying moving forward with that ground assault of Rafah would not be acceptable. Are there red lines of U.S. support for Israel?
I think that's the open question, because we have seen the Israeli War Cabinet test the American supposed red lines before. The Americans told the Israelis last autumn, as well as the international community, don't go in with a ground offensive. The Israelis did so. The Americans told the Israelis, don't expand the offensive across all of Gaza at the end of 2023. The Israelis did so. The Americans have said, okay, you really shouldn't keep killing aid workers after the deaths of 7 from World Central Kitchen. But of course, the Israelis made a token move on aid and have continued their military assault. It could be a red line if this operation is launched into Rafah, that finally the Americans would start to withdraw military support from Israel rather than increase it. But at this point, I think Netanyahu, at the very least, is using the threat as a sort of Damocles over the Americans, which is saying, don't force us into a ceasefire deal I don't like, because I will always attack Rafah if I'm irritated and if I think I need to do so.
And in that case, would the blood be on the hands of Netanyahu or the Americans if the Rafah assault moves forward?
I think everybody is complicit in terms of where we've gotten, as you talk about more than 1,000 killed in Israel, more than almost 35,000 killed in Gaza. I think Hamas is complicit because they carried out the attacks on October 7th that started the current cycle of violence. I think the Israelis are not just complicit. I think they are, in fact, on the brink of possibly committing war crimes with their mass killings. And I think the Americans have allowed the Israelis to carry out those killings by giving them just enough political space to continue. Until there is a firm line from the international community, Americans, Europeans, rest of the world, which says to Hamas, what you did was unacceptable. You cannot be legitimate in terms of ruling Palestine by doing this. And at the same time, tell Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli War Cabinet, you cannot be legitimate in the eyes of the world if you carry on these military operations. Until the international community says that and backs it up, you and I will be having this same discussion probably next month and the month after that.
And what impact of these student protests? We're seeing them around the world, notably in the U.S. This Saturday, the Washington Post also publishing a report saying that Democrats are bracing for massive protests at the party's August convention in Chicago. Could these protests, whether it's to divest from Israel or a push for a ceasefire, could they have any impact on the Biden administration in this election year?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of last year, my personal belief, and I made it clear then, is that if the mass killing stopped in Israel and in Gaza by this spring, then this story would drop down the newspapers. It would drop down uh, the uh, the TV broadcast, and there would not be an effect on the 2024 elections. But if this goes into the autumn, then it is corrosive. And it just so happens it's the party in power that bears the responsibility. So it will be far more damaging to Joe Biden than it will be to Donald Trump.
Professor, thank you very much for your time. Scott Lucas speaking to us from Birmingham. Thank you.